Hi there, and we're going to start looking at Luke chapter 21 now. And if you want to have a read through it, maybe you want to have a read through and then stop the video, or maybe you want to just have a read as we go through it. It starts off. Bear in mind, the way they cut the chapters up isn't always very helpful. You've just had this little bit at the end of Luke 20 where Jesus says this. He says, the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, they're exploiting widows, they're robbing them. He's really kind of angry about it. And then it cuts straight into chapter 21. The problem is we stop reading it end of chapter 20 and we read it as though it's a different story. It then says this, as Jesus looked up, almost the fact that Jesus is literally attacking them for their corrupt, exploitative, money-grabbing practices. And then he just looks up as if to, and sees this. And he saw the rich people putting their gifts in the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow putting in 2 very small copper coins. Very truly, he says to you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, she has put in all she has to live on. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that we have been this story has been misrepresented probably most times you've heard it preached. What Jesus, I believe, actually saying, and I think you can argue this from the text categorically, that Jesus is attacking the religious system, saying that these religious leaders are wandering around, swanning around in their fine clothes, and basically exploiting the poor. And then he sees this woman, this old woman, this widow. Bear in mind, the widows were in the passage before. We know how vulnerable widows are for being exploited. Again, that's where Jesus talks about heaven, saying, in heaven, exploitation is not happening. There's going to be no she belongs to her or she belongs to him. It's not gonna happen anymore. You're you in heaven. No more exploitation. Jesus looks up and says to them, how dare you make this poor woman, expect this poor woman to put in to the temple donations for your fine clothes, for your riches and your wealth, and you just strut around like some sort of peacock, all she's got to live on. How can you grasp money from the most vulnerable people? This is not saying, well, it is saying, but only slightly. It isn't saying, well, sort of she's given sacrificially, and isn't she wonderful? Yeah, she is. She's done a wonderful thing by giving God generously. I mean, she's clearly given sacrificially. But that's not the point Jesus is making. The point Jesus is making is, how dare you exploit her? That is what it's all about. And too often this passage is misrepresented. Again, going back to Elizabeth Fisher and the drinking beer, when we don't read the end of verse 20 and we kick straight in at verse 21, we miss the point. Read it in context. The destruction of the temple and the signs of the times it goes on to. And some of the disciples were remarking about how amazing the temple is. Again, this is a sandwich. Either side of the of the widow being exploited, they're talking about how grand and beautiful buildings are, how fine people's clothes are, as though God is impressed by architecture or fashion. I'm sure he probably admires people's ability to be creative. I'm not saying that, but I think God cares much more about hungry people having enough food to live on, hungry people surviving, people being able to be warm, fed, clothed, and sheltered. And he's like, actually, this building might look great, but actually, there'll come a day when this building is just a heap of rubble. And actually, he continues to talk about the future Jerusalem, which actually isn't, is that it says nations will rise against nations and kingdoms against kingdoms. This is the world's not going to be this cushy, nice, secure thing. You might look at these great buildings and think everything's secure. We institutions are safe. We can put our trust in this institution or that institution. We can put our trust in this great building or these great big stable things that make us feel secure. Actually, they're illusions. The only thing we can trust is Jesus. God is the faithful one, not how secure the institution is, how big the buildings are, how long a history something's got, how deeply established something is in the culture. Actually, all these things can change in an instant. But the Bible says, "Heaven and earth might pass away, but my words will never pass away." What are we building our lives on? The sand of posh buildings and fine robes, or the rock solid nature of who Jesus is and what he said to us. Jesus talks about the things that are happening. He says, so don't be deceived. Many will come in my name saying, I am he. The time is near. Don't follow them. When you hear wars and rumors of wars, don't be frightened. These things will happen. The end's not coming right away. People will fight each other. The world's going to be a messy place. People will be betrayed by their parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, friends. Some of you will be put to death. People will hate you because of Jesus. And then it says this, but not a hair on your head will perish. Well, actually, I don't think that's saying that you're going to be sort of immortal and, like there's some sort of laser force field around you. But actually, what ultimately matters is that we are saved. And nothing anybody can do to us can ever rob us of the eternity that Jesus won for us. Eternally, not even a hair on our head can be plucked out of heaven. I like this verse. It says, actually, we write these little verse cards for people here at the greenhouse, and maybe this is what I'm going to use there. Stand firm and you will win life. Great verse, isn't it? Stand firm and you'll win life. Talks about Jerusalem being surrounded by armies and all the craziness of the world. Talks about there'll be signs and all the things going crazy. And then he talks about the fig tree. Again, it's a picture that's been a recurring picture in Luke. He says, look at the fig tree and the leaves. When they sprout leaves, you know that summer is near. We can see signs, but yet, and I think creation is growing. It's almost saying that creation is groaning, knowing that there's something that needs to happen. But then Jesus says this, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Almost saying that, that these guys are going to see Jesus died and resurrected. This generation. His words may have been spoken out of his lungs into air. They're not sort of things that you can see, but actually they're eternal. Who he is, what he said. And then Jesus says, be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxiety of life. And that day will come on you suddenly like a trap. Because on those days will be on the whole earth. Be on your watch and pray you'll be able to escape all that's happened when you stand before the Son of Man. That idea about being ready when Jesus comes again. Each day Jesus was teaching the temple. In the evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him. Jesus is not preaching a happy-go-lucky message. Jesus is not preaching Joel Osteen, every little thing's going to be all right and just believe in yourself and let's have a nice fluffy life. Jesus is saying that actually life is going to be tough. It's not always going to be easy, but God is faithful. God is good. And even though life is crazy, even though life isn't always as we wanted it to be, God is able to be trusted. God is faithful. God is good.